She laughed, "You've grown taller than me, and bolder too." But what if this moment changed everything between us? The moment I stepped back into my best friend's house after all these years, it felt like nothing had changed. Yet, everything had. The familiar scent of freshly baked cookies mixed with the soft fragrance of lavender that always lingered in the corners of the living room greeted me like an old friend. The walls were the same, decorated with family photos, each one frozen in time, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. The house, now quiet and still, felt emptier somehow, the echoes of laughter from childhood memories long gone. I hadn't seen Ethan in almost 4 years, not since I left for college. Now, at 24, I felt like a stranger walking back into the place I once called home. But it wasn't just the house that felt different. The years had given me a new perspective. Where before I had seen only my best friend's mother as a warm, comforting presence, I now felt the weight of time and change between us in a way I hadn't expected. Her name was Grace, and she always had a way of making everyone feel welcome. A motherly figure, kind and soft-spoken, she'd always been there for us during late-night study sessions and impromptu movie marathons. I remembered her as someone who would laugh at my jokes, brush my hair out of my face in a motherly way, and offer cookies when I was feeling down. But today, as I stood at the front door, my heart began to race for reasons I couldn't explain. When I heard her footsteps approaching from down the hallway, I felt the strangest flutter in my chest. Her laughter echoed faintly before she appeared in the doorway. Her smile was still the same, warm and inviting, but there was something else in her eyes. The kind of look that made me hesitate. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the years between us. She looked different, of course. Her hair was a shade lighter, and there were soft lines on her face that time had drawn, but she was still stunning, graceful, confident, and striking in a way that made me feel like I was seeing her for the first time. It wasn't just the physical change. There was an energy about her now, something more than just the woman who had always taken care of us. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something in the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way her eyes lingered just a second longer on me than they ever had before. "Look at you, you've grown up," she said with a smile, her voice light and full of warmth. Her eyes softened as she took a step closer. I could feel the shift in the room, the subtle tension between us that hadn't existed before. As I smiled back, I noticed how she seemed to be looking at me differently, as if she were seeing me through a new lens. I had always been the quiet, awkward teenager she'd taken care of like a second son. Now, standing in front of her, I felt something I hadn't expected, a growing awareness of the space between us, and yet a strange pull. My gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than it should have, caught in a moment of vulnerability that I hadn't prepared for. Grace's smile faltered for a split second, then she laughed softly, brushing it off with a gentle shake of her head. "You've grown taller than me, and bolder too," she said with a chuckle, her voice dipping with a teasing warmth. It was a casual remark, but the undercurrent of it made my pulse quicken, setting the tone for the tension that I hadn't realized was beginning to build. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how the room seemed smaller now, how much my presence, no longer the teenager she'd once known, was affecting her. There was no denying that something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if it was just me or if she felt it too. But as we exchanged that brief, knowing smile, I couldn't help but wonder, had the years apart changed her feelings, as they had changed mine? This moment, seemingly insignificant, was the first of many that would reshape the way I saw her, and the way she saw me. We stood there for a moment, the air thick with the unspoken words neither of us dared to voice. It was a rare quiet between us, one that felt almost uncomfortable, yet undeniably intimate. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint rustling of leaves outside, but inside, all I could focus on was the closeness between us. It was as if time had pressed us into this shared space, and for a brief second, the world outside ceased to exist. I wondered if she felt the same. Grace stepped a little closer, her movement graceful and fluid, as though she were drawn toward me without fully realizing it. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but notice the soft sway of her hips, the gentle flow of her dress as it shifted with her every move. She didn't seem aware of the way the atmosphere had changed, how something unspoken hung between us, tethered by the weight of time, familiarity, and something else that neither of us could name. "You've grown up so much, Zach," she said, her voice light but with an undertone that felt more personal than it should have been. "Last time I saw you, you were barely taller than the kitchen counter." Her tone was teasing, but there was a depth to it, a softness that made me feel seen in a way that felt unfamiliar. I smiled, trying to brush off the unexpected rush of warmth that spread through me. "I guess the years do that to you." My voice cracked slightly as I said it, betraying the fact that my nerves were getting the best of me. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed this house, this woman, how much had changed between the simple, innocent version of myself and the one I was now becoming. Her smile softened, and for a second, I thought she was going to say something more, something that would finally break the tension. But instead, she reached forward, as if to adjust my collar or straighten something I hadn't noticed. It was such a simple, natural gesture, one she had probably done countless times before with her own son and other family members, but now, standing here as an adult, it felt like the most intimate thing she could have done. Her fingers grazed my neck lightly as she fixed my collar, the touch lingering longer than I expected. I felt the warmth of her skin against mine, her hand gently brushing the side of my neck before she pulled back as if she hadn't noticed how close we'd gotten. My breath hitched for a moment. It was the slightest touch, nothing more than a passing gesture, yet it felt like a spark. Her hand fell to her side as she stepped back, as if she had suddenly realized the closeness of our proximity. She gave a soft, almost imperceptible laugh, a nervous sound that didn't quite match the warmth in her eyes. Her gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary, and I could see the subtle shift, the way her posture had softened, the way she was now standing just slightly closer than before. "I think you're the one who's grown bolder," she said, her voice quieter now, almost to herself. There was no teasing in her words, no attempt to mask the change in our dynamic. Her gaze didn't waver from mine, and for a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us, standing there in a stillness that was both comforting and electric. I couldn't find the right words to respond. I wanted to say something, to acknowledge the way my heart had started racing, the way her simple touch had ignited something inside me. But the silence between us stretched on, thick and heavy, as if we both knew something had shifted but neither of us was ready to admit it. As she stepped back slightly, giving me a little more space, I felt a deep sense of loss, as if I were already missing something that hadn't yet been fully realized. I couldn't help but wonder if she was feeling it too, the pull, the tension. It was clear that something had changed, but neither of us knew how to handle it. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That touch, so innocent and fleeting, had set something in motion. And I had a feeling that we were both going to have to face it sooner or later. The silence stretched between us, thick and warm, like the space between two people who had known each other forever, yet suddenly found themselves trying to figure out what to say next. Grace sat down on the couch opposite me, folding her legs under her with a casual elegance that only seemed to amplify the gravity of the moment. Her gaze briefly flickered to the window, out into the garden, but her mind seemed distant. I noticed that she wasn't looking at me quite the same way she had when I first walked in. The warmth in her eyes was still there, but there was something else now, a quiet curiosity, as if she were seeing me anew. I shifted in my seat, my nerves prickling. The conversation was slow to start, as we both seemed to be carefully choosing our words, testing the waters of this new dynamic that neither of us had anticipated. I cleared my throat and smiled, trying to make light of the situation, but there was a thread of vulnerability running beneath my words that I couldn't ignore. "It's been too long," I said, looking at her. "Feels like forever since I was here last." Grace chuckled softly, her laugh filling the space between us like a familiar melody. "Time does have a way of slipping by, doesn't it?" she replied, the hint of nostalgia in her voice unmistakable. "One day you're making peanut butter sandwiches for your friends, and the next, you're all grown up. Seems like only yesterday you were too shy to even look me in the eye." Her words made me laugh, though there was a tightness in my chest as I recalled those awkward years. I had always admired Grace from a distance, her strength, her grace, her quiet wisdom, but as a teenager, I had never dared to view her in any other light. Now, everything felt different. It was like a veil had been lifted, revealing a version of her that I was only just beginning to recognize. The woman sitting across from me wasn't just my best friend's mom anymore. She was someone with her own life, her own stories, and now, with the passage of time, I couldn't help but notice how those stories were starting to intertwine with mine. I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it, I said, shifting slightly in my seat. It feels weird to be back. So much has changed. Grace gave me a small, understanding smile. It's funny how life moves forward like that. But some things never really change. You'll always be that young boy I used to worry about, always running around the house, eating all my cookies. The simplicity of her words should have been comforting, but they hit me differently now. There was an undercurrent of sadness there, something in the way she said it that made me pause. I could sense that her life had changed in ways she wasn't fully ready to speak about. There was a quiet vulnerability in her voice, a sense of longing for something, maybe for the time before, when everything was simpler, when the house had been filled with the laughter of growing children. "How about you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "How've you been? I mean, how's everything?" Her expression softened at the question, and for a moment, I could see the layers of years unraveling in her eyes. "Oh, life's been busy. You get to a point where you start to realize how much you've missed, how much you've let slip by." She paused, her gaze drifting down to her hands, folded in her lap. "But I'm okay. I'm managing." Her words were so carefully chosen, but the way she said them made me realize how much she was holding back. Grace was always the strong one, the one who held everything together, always offering a smile, a kind word, a helping hand. But now, as I sat across from her, I could see that she was tired, worn down by the years, and that facade of strength wasn't as solid as it had once been. There was a long pause between us, neither of us rushing to fill it. We sat there in the quiet, two people who had shared years of history, but now found themselves on the edge of something new, something fragile. Grace glanced back at me then, her eyes meeting mine once more, and there was something different in the way she looked at me now. It wasn't just the motherly warmth that had always been there. There was a depth to her gaze now, a shift in the way she saw me, or maybe in the way I was seeing her. She seemed to search my face, as if trying to gauge what had changed between us. I wasn't sure what had happened, but the words seemed to come out before I could stop them. "I missed you," I said softly, unsure if I was speaking more to the woman in front of me or the memory of the house I once knew. Grace's lips curled into a small, wistful smile. "I missed you too, Zach. It's strange, isn't it? Watching you grow up and become someone I don't quite recognize anymore." The statement hung in the air, a subtle truth that neither of us wanted to face. Things had changed. We had changed. And no matter how hard we tried to ignore it, there was no going back. As the conversation slowed, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of something more? Or just the inevitable unfolding of time? There was something about the silence that followed our conversation that felt heavier than it should have been. As we sat there, the weight of unspoken truths settled between us, making the air feel thick, almost suffocating. I could see it in Grace's eyes, the way she would glance at me, then look away, as if she was trying to find the right words but couldn't quite bring herself to speak them. I had known her for so long, but in that moment, she felt distant, a person hiding behind the walls of her own experiences, emotions, and stories she had never shared. The house around us was still, the only sound being the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. I found myself stealing glances at her, noticing the lines that had crept into her face over the years, the soft sag of her shoulders, things I had never noticed before. Grace was always the strong one, the woman who held everything together, always quick with a smile and a warm word. But now, as I sat across from her, there was a vulnerability in her posture, a quiet sadness that seemed to linger just beneath the surface. She finally broke the silence, her voice softer than before. You know, it's funny, she began, her hands clasped together tightly in her lap. I always thought I had everything under control. That I could juggle work, my son, and everything else, and still keep it all together. But sometimes, I find myself wondering if it was ever enough. I leaned forward, my heart suddenly aching for her. She was always the one who took care of everything, always the one who made sure everyone else was okay. But now, I could see the cracks in her armor, the pain she had kept hidden for so long. There was something in her words that made my chest tighten, a feeling that maybe she had never truly allowed herself to be vulnerable, to let anyone in and see the cracks beneath her carefully constructed facade. Grace's eyes welled up slightly, and she quickly blinked away the tears, as if she were embarrassed by her own emotions. She gave a small, almost defeated smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, if I just kept pushing, everything would turn out okay. But now, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm just floating through life, waiting for something to change. Her confession hit me harder than I had expected. I had always admired Grace for her strength, but hearing her admit to feeling lost, something I had never imagined her feeling, made my heart ache. I had seen her as this pillar of unwavering support, but now I was seeing her as a woman who had her own struggles, her own fears, and her own doubts. Without thinking, I reached out and placed a hand on hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the right one. I didn't say anything at first, I just let the touch speak for itself. Grace's fingers twitched under mine, as if she were surprised by the warmth, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she gave me a soft look, one that said more than words could ever convey. Her eyes were full of gratitude, but there was something else there too, something deeper. A connection that had shifted between us, but one we both didn't fully understand. You don't have to do everything alone, you know, I said quietly, my voice softer than I intended. You've always been there for me, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself. Grace's gaze dropped to our hands, the weight of my words sinking in. She didn't pull away, but there was a hesitation, a moment of internal struggle. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. It's just hard, Zach. I've spent so much of my life taking care of others, I forgot to take care of myself. The vulnerability in her voice shook me. Grace had always been the one who took care of everyone else, but I had never stopped to consider that she, too, needed someone to lean on. In that moment, I realized just how much she had sacrificed, how much she had hidden her own needs and desires behind the role of caretaker. I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for, I said, my words flowing more naturally now. But it's okay to be human, Grace. It's okay to need someone. She smiled at that, though it was tinged with sadness. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw the raw emotion she had been holding inside. Thank you, Zach. You have no idea how much that means to me. There was an intimacy in this moment, a deep